Hi everyone, welcome to our live stream. I'm super excited to be here today, and thank you so much to everyone for joining us. As soon as the incredible Jami Powell, who we are hosting today, joins our live stream, then I will invite her in and we'll get the party started. So before Jami comes, Jami's here. So I will invite her and then we'll start. Oh my God, hello.
Hi,
How's it going?
I'm well. How are you?
I am also well, or well as can be. So thank you, Jami, for joining us today, and I'm going to get started with our program. So this evening, I'm going to be chatting with Jami Powell, a citizen of the Osage Nation and the Hood Museum of Art's first associate curator. I just made associate and curator in one word of Native American art. So throughout this whole month of April, me and my co-intern, Emily Santana, have been hosting different people involved with Indigenous fashion, and we've been chatting with artists and also curators. So last week we had Amber Dawn Barobe, and if you missed that program, go to our IGTV to check it out. And also, before we get started in our conversation, I just want to say, please comment, please ask Jami your questions. I have questions for Jami, but I'm sure they're not going to be anywhere as near as entertaining as your questions for our viewers. And so before I get into Jami's introduction, I'm going to just quickly but importantly say the SAR land acknowledgement. The School for Advanced Research is located on traditional lands of the Tewa people, Oga Poge Owinge, which translates to White Shell Water Place or Santa Fe, New Mexico. Surrounding our campus are the landscapes of Pueblo, Apache, and Navajo communities, whose people continue to maintain vital connections to this place. As an institution privileged to steward Indigenous cultural material and committed to uplifting Indigenous voices, we strive to maintain respectful and mutually beneficial relationships with these communities. We not only honor the ancestral stewards of this land, but celebrate their past, present, and future. We urge you to take the time to learn more about these communities and their histories through our public programs, like this one today, online exhibits, and guidelines for collaboration. Okay, and so now, excuse me as I look at my notes, because for Jami's
Sorry.
you're totally
That was
fine.
the instructional video on how to join an Instagram live because I'm old and this is the first time I've ever done this, clearly.
No, you're totally fine. I also love that video with her Italian accent. Um, but sorry. So now I'm going to do Jami's introduction. I'm going to be looking at my notes because Jami is such an accomplished woman. And beyond, what's on this paper here, Jami has also been really incredible mentor to me. I don't know how I would have survived undergrad without her. And I have lots and lots of really fond memories. I don't want to cry. Okay, so Jami Powell is the Hood Museum of Art's first associate curator of Native American art and was recently appointed as a lecturer in Native American Studies in Dartmouth. I took one of her classes. She's a great teacher. Jami is a citizen of the Osage Nation and has a PhD in anthropology from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Prior to working at the Hood, she was a faculty lecturer at Tufts University. She has also worked as a research assistant at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, was a Mellon Fellow at the Peabody Essex Museum, and has continued research projects at the Field Museum of Natural History and the Denver Art Museum. Powell's research examines the representations of Indigenous peoples and museums, as well as the interventions contemporary Indigenous artists make through creative acts of self-representation. Powell is currently working on a book manuscript titled Stitching an Osage Future, Aesthetic Resistance and Self-Representation. She has also published articles in Museum Anthropology, Panorama, Museum Management, and Curator as an editorial advisor for First American Art magazine. Powell has served on curatorial advisory boards for the Philadelphia Museum of Art, Yale University Art Gallery, and the Smithsonian Museum of American Art. She is the recipient of the 2020 New Leadership Award from Art Table, SNAPS, and which is the foremost professional organization dedicated to advancing the leadership of women in the visual arts. She also leads the annual Indigenous Peoples Month fashion show at Dartmouth College. So, Jami, is there anything I missed or that you'd like to say about yourself?
No, uh, you covered a lot there. Uh, and thank you so much for having me. I'll just add that I am joining you from the unceded and ancestral lands of the Abenaki peoples, and that the Hood Museum of Art at Dartmouth, where I work, occupies the lands and waters of Abenaki peoples and was built without permission from the Abenaki Nation. The institution has also benefited from the economies of slavery and the labors of African descended captives. This acknowledgement, which I use in all of my public talks, reminds us of the significance of place and the legacies of dispossession and enslavement that sustained and enriched New England. It also provides a crucial foundation for building respectful relationships with all those who call these lands home today and into the future.
Thank you so much. I know that's really important for us to say. Um, so as we segue into our questions, I mentioned in your introduction that you're writing a book called Stitching an Osage Future, Aesthetic Resistance and Self-Representation. Can you please tell our viewers more about this?
Book. Um, I am going to write this book. It was my dissertation, my PhD dissertation that I defended in 2018. That I have just not had the time to work on, but really want to work on it. It is, the foundation of the book is my PhD research, where I was looking at the intersections of Osage women's work and sovereignty, and the work that artists are doing within mainstream museum spaces. And so I got to work with some incredible Osage artists, Chris Papan, and a project he did at the Field Museum in Chicago, Yadika and Anita Fields, and Tom Fields, an exhibition that they were part of at the Sam Noble Museum at the Sam Noble Museum of Oklahoma Natural History, as well as working with artists like Norman Akers, Wendy Ponca, and just these incredible Osage folks who are really contributing to kind of imagining a future for our nation and for our people.
Thank you. And I can't imagine writing a book. That sounds overwhelming, especially since you're doing so many other fantastic things. But for some of our viewers who are watching, if you get the chance or you ever come across Jami's dissertation, which is, like she said, a lot like her forthcoming book, you should totally read it. I learned a lot. I read it in your class. And for someone who's not Osage, I'm Navajo. Could you please tell some of our other viewers who aren't Osage a little bit more about Osage ribbon work?
Yeah. So, gosh, now you outed me that I assigned my dissertation to my students, but it was really just because I wanted to talk about ribbon work and textiles. Osage ribbon work is a practice that came to our communities through kind of the entanglements with colonial nations and settler nations and the trade goods that came to our communities through these relationships. And so what Osage and other indigenous women from the Great Lakes and Prairie regions, for lack of a better term, uh, did was they took these ribbons that Europeans and European women used to adorn hats and um, you know, to tie in their hair, and they literally ripped them apart and cut them into designs and shapes that were meaningful within their own communities, and stitched them back together into these patterns, and use them in ways that were meaningful and relevant within their own lives, and with their existing artistic practices.
And throughout your dissertation, you have images of a lot of really fantastic Osage ribbon work. That jean jacket with the Osage ribbon work is my favorite. And so, if your or for our viewers, Jami's grandmother Georgianne has been an inspiration to you, and you talk about and she was a really skilled artist. And I think a lot of us Indigenous people have parents, grandparents, great grandparents who have been such phenomenal artists. Whether for me that was Navajo rugs, and I think it's a common experience that we all share. But during that time, these incredible artists were not considered artists; instead, they were considered craftspeople. So I'm wondering, do you consider yourself, or I mean, do you consider your grandmother a fashion designer? And also, what do you think that she considered herself in her practice?
Yeah, I often talk about my great grandmother Georgianne as an artist and activist, but I don't think that those are words she would have used to describe herself. She was the first female vice president for the National Congress of American Indians, and she also, along with her sisters, Genevieve and Louise, opened a store in Pawhuska, Oklahoma in 1957. That a women-owned business in rural Oklahoma in 1957. Um, and so, she and her sisters were amazing and were creating these pieces. And they had fashion shows, and they made clothes that people in our community wore for dances and other important social gatherings. But they also made like kind of ready to wear clothes and fashion, like like dresses with ribbon work on them, or a blazer with ribbon work. And so really just a way to kind of carry um, carry our identity and our community and things that are important with us in our daily lives. And so I don't think she would have talked about herself as an artist. I think she, would have said she sews or does crafts, or, maybe I think I've heard her refer to herself as a seamstress. Sorry, my kids let my dog in the room, so I'm gonna lock them out. I'm gonna lock the door.
No worries.
But yeah, so I don't think she would have referred to herself as an artist. But the um, first time I actually, the first time I ever went to the Met Museum in New York, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, was to go see a piece of my grandmother's work that was in their collections. So before I ever stepped into the galleries or went anywhere else in that institution that is like this like pillar of the art world, I went back into storage and saw something that my grandmother made. And and if that doesn't make what she did art, then I don't know what does.
Yeah.
And I think these divisions, between art and craft are really arbitrary. Um, and when we talk about things as art, it can be um, something being art doesn't preclude it from existing as something else. So a lot of the things that we have within our communities are made for a particular purpose, but they are beautiful, and they are works of art, but they're also religious or ceremonial, or have important family significance, or they're utilitarian. And so the idea that something has to exist solely as an art object in order to be considered art isn't really useful or realistic.
And like that brings up a good point, because something I've been thinking about recently is like all of these binaries and categorizations that kind of exist in the Western realm. If you think about like pre-contact, I don't really think that that had as much importance. It was just seen as a way of life. Like I think about a lot of times how art was inherently tied to indigeneity, and how like people are starting to get back to that, and it's really beautiful. And especially have how you have this her pieces, it's still a part of her with us in this world. And that's really beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, I was just an article that I'm teaching this week for my class, which you took, is a piece by Jessica Horton and Janet Berlow and it's a critique of new materialisms. And it's this idea that like now within art history, people are recognizing that, objects are made by someone and like are never fully separate from that individual and like contain a part of that individual within them. And like now it's a thing, it has this label, new materialisms. And, you know, when I teach that, a lot of my students are like, yeah, I, I don't need, you know, uh, I don't need someone to tell me that. That has been an understanding within my community since time immemorial. And I don't, you know, and so I think you raise an issue that's important to think about. That is, a lot of times our understandings and Indigenous ways of knowing and Indigenous knowledges allow for a lot more complexity than Western scholarship. And so, it's why it's so important to kind of center Indigenous ways of knowing within our work, because it opens up the possibility to teach our colleagues that it's okay to talk about things that are complicated and messy, and it's a part of life. So it's useful within our communities, but can also be useful within scholarship as well.
Yeah, and Jamie, I think that like I see you as a role model of this is really like breaking this binary between what's indigenous and what's like Western art. I think the Hood Museum does a really fabulous job of that. Many times, us in like the Hood Museum conference room talking about these topics, I think was a good example of that. And I think that's a great segue into our next question. So, last fall was Dartmouth's second annual Indigenous Fashion Showcase. This year it was virtual due to the pandemic, but was co-sponsored by the Hood Museum of Art. You've been a really phenomenal leader in this event. The first event was really fabulous. It was at the Hood Museum, and we had a beautiful, lovely red carpet. And so, can you tell our viewers a little bit more about your motivation to lead a Native fashion event like this? And then another question I have is how do you envision this event happening in the future and hopefully post pandemic?
Yeah, so I mean, my involvement with the event really emerged from my inability to say no to students. Um, and so I love our NADs, as we call them, the Native Americans at Dartmouth, our students who are in NAD and our Hokupa'a students. And, students approached me with this idea and said, we, want to make this happen, but we don't know how. And, one of the amazing things about the position that I'm in and the fact that I reached this level in my career is that I have finite, but I have power now and I have resources and I have the ability to create space for students and artists to do things that they might not otherwise have the opportunity to do. And so a group of students approached me and said that they would like to do this as part of, the Indigenous Peoples Month activities. And I thought that it was such a great idea that, rather than having some kind of like history focused panel or, you know, um, talking, I think the theme for Indigenous Peoples Month that year was really important and was, missing and murdered Indigenous women. Um, you know, but a way to kind of create space for these conversations and to address some of these issues that our communities are facing is to show the vibrancy and creative capacity and strength of our communities today. And one of the ways that comes through is through the beautiful art and fashion and jewelry that uh, that Indigenous artists and particularly women are making. And so um, it was creating a space. And I, as you were one of my interns. I was like, I have space. I have interns who can use their paid hours to help pull this together. So you worked with our amazing colleagues in the Claflin Jewelry Studio to have a button making station. And so there were, incredible buttons. I think you had like a Hot Cheetos button. There were some inside jokes. You had a button that said like, this is Abenaki
Yeah.
land. Um, and so we also, the beading circle, set up a station, and there was a space for students to do some beadwork. Um, Students brought their art in. I brought a couple of pieces of art from my own personal collection. I brought a Chris Papan drawing of my grandmother, Georgianne, and a Yadika Fields painting that I have in. And then we had a red carpet and students. I also brought in a lot of my clothes and jewelry. And the students, you all just did such an amazing job. And we had an MC and music, and it was it was a really wonderful event. And so this past year, when we transitioned to virtual, we invited Dartmouth alum Geo Neptune to join us, and they did a fantastic job. And while I'm glad that we were able to continue doing it um, in a virtual space, I really can't wait to have it in person again. But one of the things that's really exciting is that we will, for events like that, we'll now be able to live stream. And so the event will be in person, but we'll be able to live stream the event, because one of the things that we noticed was that, our students were joining, but also their families. And so their like moms and aunties and cousins were commenting on the video and engaging in the program. And so, when we do it in the future, it'll be great for the students who are on campus, but also because of the way the students' D plan works, or if they're having an off term where they're not on campus, they can still participate and watch, and their families can watch and have a connection to them as well, because, for a lot of our students, they're really far away from home. And so for us to be able to do an event like that where they can kind of connect with their families, and their families can see what they're up to, will be really great. So I'm excited to have our third event this October. And what's really great is our team, our programming team at the museum is now like, they're on it. We were talking to me and they're like, okay. And I know, like, they're like, what date in October is this going to be? Because we know we have to get that on the calendar before anything else goes into October. And so it's something that our team looks forward to as well.
Yeah, and I watched it this year, and I think, the virtual world is fabulous because as an alumna, I was like, I want to go. And, I see Geo Neptune Bear on Instagram, and I'm like a fangirl. So it's like, oh my God, I have to see like their commentary, which was just hilarious and delightful. And something else that I think you touched on is that like the Native American students at Dartmouth are such talented artists in their own rights. And so for a fashion show to be able to display their work was really great, because I think students not only excel in the classroom, but also in traditional works. So like seeing, like for example, like Shelby Snyder and how she's such a talented seamstress, and seeing like her work being exhibited in that way, I think was really special. And so, yeah, as an alumna, and to all of our viewers, I encourage you to look out for that event because it's like very inspiring, but it's also very fun. And I laughed a lot. It was really great. Um, and so maybe we can transition into this next question. So, you've been a curator at the Hood Museum, and you've encouraged some really amazing contemporary Native American art acquisitions. And it's hard to choose, but my favorite among the Native American objects, I think, is Old Days, Modern Ways, which is a gorgeous beaded purse by Ken Williams Jr., who's an Arapaho and Seneca artist. If you could please tell our viewers why you acquired this piece, and also can we expect to see this piece in any future exhibits? And I'm also going to try to show the piece, but bear with me here as this is on a piece of paper. So go ahead, Jami.
Yeah, so this beaded bag by Ken Williams Jr. is it's amazing. And the picture, even not via Instagram paper transfer, it just doesn't do it justice. If you can't tell the feathers and the headdress, there's dimensionality to them, and so he took rolled pieces, small pieces of wool, and stitched them down. The braids on the woman are actual hair that are braided. Her necklace is has shell beads, and his breastplate is quills. And so there's dimensionality, not just the incredible work he's able to do with shading and contour, like with the beads themselves. Um, and so the museum didn't have any contemporary um, beadwork in the collection, but we, like a lot of other institutions, have a lot of historic beadwork. And so I wanted to bring a contemporary piece into the collection. And that one was just one of my other interests as a curator, and a show that I am working on, um, is the role of humor within our communities. And so I know the Wheelwright just had an exhibition on Native humor, and other folks have done projects on Native humor as well. But it's so pervasive within our communities. And one of the things, and this is an aside, but last weekend I went to DC last minute and was able to have dinner with my cousin. And she and I, it was like the first time we'd like been at a restaurant um, since COVID. Uh, and we were also without our kids, which doesn't happen very often. And we laughed so hard that people kept staring at us. And it was just, I was like, I haven't laughed this hard in so long, but it's something that, like if there's, I don't like to make generalizations, or, obviously stereotypes aren't always great, but the like Native people enjoy laughing is one that I can get on board with. And so there's also humor in the piece. And so one of the inspirations for the Old Days Modern Ways was a bag of cotton candy. So Ken was telling me about the piece and the inspiration for it. And he said that he was standing in line at the grocery store and he has a sweet tooth. And so he got a bag of cotton candy and looked inside and really enjoyed the way the pinks and blues and yellows looked like puffy clouds in the bag. And he was like, I want to bead that. And so the front side is this portrait. And the back side are these clouds of cotton candy with Swarovski crystals. And it really disrupts this idea that a lot of people have, that everything that Native Americans do has to be spiritual or sacred or ceremonial, and that like sometimes like you can be inspired and create something because you like cotton candy. Or other pieces we have in the collection, like an Allison Marks Bremner piece, that's she's a Clinket artist, and we have a paddle, um,
Oh,
a
yeah.
cedar paddle in the collection that's form line design, and it's a nude of Burt Reynolds on a bearskin rug, because she remembered being scandalized by the experience of like seeing her mom and aunties like around the table coming home from school one day, like looking at this Burt Reynolds thing. So, that like as Native people, we are part of our communities, and that plays an important role in many of our lives. But we also exist in the world and pop culture, and mainstream media, and you know, other things inspire us in the work that we do and the things that we create. And so I really enjoy kind of with some of these examples using humor to kind of bring that about and to share that with our audiences.
Yeah, and what kind of stood out to me in your commentary was the pinks. I love pink, and to me, I think it's just such a beautiful color to see. I think sometimes in the past, Native people were only encouraged to use sacred colors, the four sacred colors in your beadwork or along those lines of natural things. And I just love the electric color on those pieces. And so for any of our viewers, I know I just showed you an awful printed out picture, but if you go to the Hood Museum's website, you can search all of their collections, including the Native American collections, and you can look up this piece and really see it in beautiful detail. And also the Burt paddle is so funny to me. Like I also, to our viewers, you should look that up. It cracks me up.
It was like the first moment where I felt like a real art museum curator, Because oftentimes, like a lot of folks, I struggle with imposter syndrome, and I'm like, I don't belong in this space. These people are so fancy. But I was like, I bought a work of art with like a nude person in repose. Like, yeah, it's Burt Reynolds and it's a joke, but like that was the first nude I ever bought, and so I was like, I'm a real curator now. I've made it.
And I also just think that it's like such a like funny piece, and like kind of going back to humor is like with Native women, okay, Native people in general, and of course, everyone else, not to impose stereotypes, everyone else has great humor, but like the way just of like hearty laughing, I think is just such good medicine and like makes me just feel so good. And I remember seeing that piece, and me and Dylan, who was a co-intern, we just thought it was so funny. And like it's stuff like that that I think is really great that you as a curator get to kind of like bring that into the hood. Um, and so on the same kind of like line, talking about acquisitions for the hood, um, as a fashion enthusiast, I was very excited to see that you and Jami Akuma and also the Hood were written about in a recent Vogue article titled "A Bird with Character Inspired These Beautiful Beaded Boots," which features a pair of beaded boots by the incredible artist Jami Akuma that was commissioned by the Hood Museum. The article states, the boots will be on display at the museum in a 2022 exhibit exploring American artists' relationship with the natural world. It's the first time that we're putting our Native American and American collection together, says Jami Powell, the museum's associate curator of Native American art. And when I was like, oh my God, it's Jami and Vogue. So can you please tell our viewers more about this pair of boots and the story behind them? And again, I will be showing kind of a printed image on the screen. So this is no reflection of the piece in person, but just so viewers can see.
Yeah, and I can't tell you how much pictures do not do these boots justice. So uh, about 2 years ago, I reached out to Jami and wanted to commission a pair of boots from her. You know, they're so iconic, but also, having that kind of piece within our collection, I think is just really exciting for many of our students who are beadworkers and who are into fashion, and for them to be able to like see those pieces in person and to study them in person and to get up close and personal. As someone who has like in fits and starts tried to learn to do ribbon work my whole life, it wasn't really until I started studying them, um, and actually looking at the materials and like flipping them over and seeing like what kinds of techniques they're using on the back, and also seeing the imperfections within some of these pieces, that I really understood and like was confident enough to like create work myself. um, but so we commissioned a piece, and the prompt that I gave Jami, she asked like, what do what kind do you want? And I said, I just want them to be beautiful, but also if there's something that you haven't had the opportunity or time to work on, that's something that you've always wanted to do, please feel free to use this moment to do that. And so these are actually the first piece where she has incorporated an aspect of her personal life into the piece. And so Peep, the bird that you see on the boots, was a Western scrub jay, a California scrub jay, who fell out of its nest near her home when she was a child, and her dad brought it in. Her family nursed Peep back to health, and I guess they tried to release him a few times, but he never left. And so he was with her for 26 years, which I was like, who knew birds lived that long? Not me. And so, but if you'll show the picture again so people can maybe see, you'll notice there's a slight variation in the shades of white in the background. And that's actually, and then the black kind of triangulated pieces, those are piano keys, because when Jami would play piano, Peep would come and sit on the edge of the piano and like listen to her play. And so they've got piano keys on them as well. They're kind of like leggings, and then they snap or button onto the boots at the bottom. And we had a conversation about them, and she was originally going to bead them directly onto boots like other pieces she created, but with the size of beads she wanted to use and the kind of intricate details she wanted to create, she needed to be able to work on a flat surface. And so she kind of created these leggings that slide over a pair of boots. And I can't give anything away, but I will say that this is not the last you've seen of these boots in fashion magazines. And so sometime in the coming months, the boots will reappear with a high fashion twist. So.
Well, folks, you heard it here from Jami to keep on the lookout. And if you also want to see these boots, you can head to the SAR Instagram. We just recently posted about them. But again, I encourage you to look at the Hood Museum's collection, and it's all online. We do have a comment. Someone said, OMG, bird lore. Yeah, I love birds too. And like, you all should read the Vogue article too, because it's such a sweet story. And I think we've all had experiences with childhood pets and just the really sweet nostalgia. I also love the color blue that she chose, and with the piano, it's really a beautiful storytelling. And then Part-Time Gypsy has the star eyes. I'm just in awe of the boots. I wish I could wear the boots. I wish I could that, and also old days, modern ways, like showing up to like Indian market, and that is a dream.
I will. So speaking of dreams, two things. So I don't forget, the story in Vogue was written by Christian Allaire. And so, Christian is an Indigenous writer for Vogue. And if you just go and like search Christian Allaire in the Vogue pages, read everything he's written. The kinds of representations and coverage of Native fashion that have been featured in Vogue have really increased since he came on their staff. And so Christian wrote that piece, and so I want to make sure to shout out to Christian. Back to being in Santa Fe for Old Days, Modern Ways. One of the highlights of my career was actually buying that bag and seeing the little red sticker on the wall next to it. But next to the bag we purchased, there was a dentalium necklace that was purchased by Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And so it was like my red sticker and then Ruth Bader Ginsburg red sticker right next to each other. And I was like, that's really cool. And
two icons.
Like, it was like a fangirl moment.
Two legends. I agree. And Ian says such a beautiful story, which I totally agree. And yeah, as someone who's like native and obsessed with all things fashion, it's been a really big joy to see Christian like write all these pieces. Also to all of our viewers, he recently, literally like the other day, came out with his first book, and it is available for order. I got it here at Collected Works in Santa Fe, so make sure you check out that too. So kind of as we're talking about these acquisitions, why is it important for you as a curator to acquire pieces of Native American high fashion and couture for the Hood Museum?
Yeah, so I mean, it's like we were talking about that like art isn't a singular category. And so, these pieces that are, created as, high fashion aren't only that, they can also be works of art. And so, and I think that one of, for me personally, one of the reasons why I, have collected in that area has just been the ability to, for people to engage on a personal level with the works. And so it's like boots. Everybody's worn boots in their life, especially up here in New England, or a purse. A lot of people have carried a purse or seen purses. And so, when you can take kind of an everyday object and make it something incredible, it just gives people a point of connection to it. that, you know, kind of makes it easier for them to relate to the piece and the issues and ideas that the artists are addressing within it.
I love that. I love that you just mentioned the connection between like fashion and everyday, because whether you want to or not, all of us participate in fashion. We all wear clothes. And I think it's really beautiful that, you know, people can connect through that.
Is that
So,
a line from The Devil Wears Prada? Isn't that like a,
no, but if
oh,
it is,
okay.
like, if it is, my mind is just like, you know,
You've seen
connected
it
with,
so many times that it's, you're just quoting
yeah,
it without even realizing.
exactly. And also, Ian says signed copies of Christian's book available on his site too, I believe. And that's really great. I kind of wish I knew that. And so now to talk about something I'm really super excited about and have been working hard with you on is on May 13th, Indigenous Jewelry Today, Four Perspectives from Hawaii to New York, a dynamic conversation on topics from design to accountability within contemporary artistic practice is being streamed live on Dartmouth's Hop YouTube channel. You've been a leader in this event and you've curated all of the artists who are jewelry makers. Um, there's four makers, Carrie Atumbi, who's Kiowa, Nanuma Beck Dinet, who is a fellow here at SAR, Margaret Jacobs, who's Mohawk, and Tara, excuse my Kanaka Maoli, Kenue Guampak, and she's Kanaka Maoli. Why did you want this event to happen, and can you please tell our viewers more about it?
Yeah, so this event actually started with you when you were still my intern. We had planned last spring to have Nanaba Beck and Margaret Jacobs do an in-person conversation. And, you know, COVID happened, and so that didn't happen. But we still really wanted to have a dialogue and, you know, with doing a virtual event, we're able to bring more voices into the conversation. And when we started talking about organizing it, I was like, I don't need to moderate this. Let's bring Shondine back and have Shondine moderate because clearly you're wonderful at it. But, you know, it's something that, you know, you have, you know, you worked in the jewelry studio um, at the Hopkins Center for the Arts at the Claflin Jewelry Studio. You made your own piece and you have continued to make jewelry since you left. And so, you know, for you to facilitate this dialogue is really exciting. And it's like a proud auntie moment for me. And I'm just glad that I'm not going to be on camera for the event because I'll probably just like sob happy auntie tears the whole time. And kind of like you almost made me cry at the beginning of this, but um, funny story when we had the intern virtual like going away uh, luncheon last year for our interns. Haley made everyone cry, including me, for her going away, and all of my colleagues were like, "Wow, you guys are really close." And it's like, yeah, but also not to generalize, Native women cry a lot.
I know I'm like about to cry right now. I have like my box of tissues. I'm like, ugh. And I think also, Jamie, you chose really wonderful. I mean, not just we all kind of had this idea, but I loved your inclusion of Tara and Carrie. I think they're really fabulous and talented, and it's super exciting. I think to integrate jewelry, especially Indigenous jewelry, with like in this high fashion world, especially in this conversation today about Indigenous fashion, because kind of what we talked about at the beginning of the conversation. I think for a long time that was considered craft and like a folk art. And I really do see in the future, I have a vision of this being, you know, in vogue. And people like Nana Bobek, I think she is fabulous as a Navajo jeweler and she's fabulous as a jeweler in her own right, which is a really beautiful thing. So we have a comment from Lisa Kevin 30. She said, Jamie, your grandma and great grandma also were caught by your mom looking at the Burt Reynolds issue.
That's very funny. I love that.
I I mean, Burt Reynolds, an icon.
Also, hi mom.
Yeah, yeah, hello. So Ian says, I applaud your attempt at Oleolo, Hawaii. Thank you, Ian. I'm trying my best out here.
Yeah. Hi, Ian. Also, just one of the reasons why we included Tara too. And Ian came and spoke to my class last year. Um, and we, like, I'm in the Native American, the department that I teach in is now Native American Studies, and it's a program, but we're now the Native American and Indigenous Studies department, and the college has really done a lot of recruitment and increased recruitment for Pacifica students. And so it's important to me to include those students within the work that I'm doing at the museum. And so Ian gave a great talk to my students, and now actually one of my interns next year is Kanaka Maoli, and her goal, Ian, I think I already told you this at one point, is to bring you out to do some kind of landscape art project at the college with our Hokupa'a students. So, just making sure that we're including as many voices in the conversation as possible, and that even though I'm when I read the land and labor acknowledgement at the beginning of our conversation, that I'm also working with my colleagues in AAAS and other departments, because we have issues that are important to our communities as Native people, but there are also other underrepresented and disenfranchised groups across campus. And so making sure that we are serving those students as well and providing resources for them, and that we are being good allies and collaborators and conspirators in the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as someone who has Indigenous Pacifica friends, and I've been lucky enough to be in New Zealand and Tahiti and Hawaii, I think that it's so important that in these Indigenous conversations we include our Pacifica brothers and sisters. And I really applaud you, Jami, for doing that. I know at Dartmouth we could probably rant about this for a long time, but that is so quintessential to our programming. And Ian says, I deeply mahalo you for all of your work. I totally agree. And he also says, so game. And for anyone watching, if you don't know Ian, go click on his profile. He's like a super talented artist. And yeah, we're plugging Ian right now. So go check out Ian's page. So we've kind of talked about this, but you also teach classes at Dartmouth College. Also, okay, I'm just having another random memory. When Ian was teaching in one of these classes I took with you, he told me the SAR ghost stories, which still haunt me to this day. But when you're teaching these types of classes, how do you go about teaching Native American fashion in the classroom? Especially because I know you teach to Native students, but also non-Native students.
Yeah, so I think Native women have been like creating like high fashion couture since before it was a thing. And so, like anytime we show, moccasins or hide dresses or shell jewelry from the collection, pieces that are from, the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, that like these are works of art, they're fashion, but they were also things that like held deep meaning for people. Um, and so, I think it's important to teach that. One of the things that I really enjoy teaching about is, kind of the trade relations that kind of enabled some of the works that we see. And so, when people teach about westward expansion and colonialism, the focus is often on dispossession, and it's important and it's a reality, but even in the face of that dispossession and violence, that Native people and Native women in particular were creating items of beauty, and finding ways to create and take the time to make these really intricate and beautiful garments for their families to wear, it's really important to recognize that, and really shows I think one of my favorite things in any museum collection are like the baby moccasins, or like baby clothes, because you see this and you're like, you can tell how much people care about children and and that's people caring about the future. And so really making that investment, um, in young people, and putting that time and energy into creating something for children that they'll only wear, for maybe once, you know. So focusing on that, and also in making sure that people understand that like international trade preceded the arrival of Europeans. And so there were trade networks where people were getting macaw feathers, from what is now Mexico, to the like what is now St. Louis area, um, and abalone shell, from the coast, making its way inland, and really um, showing that like these networks existed before colonization, and recognizing that. And so when Europeans arrived and these other goods arrived, there was already, an understanding of trade and interaction, um, to where people were incorporating these items into their material culture and fashion, in deeply meaningful and creative ways, and not just using them at face value. And so like people who are taking like brass kettles and like creating gorgets out of them and wearing them, like, not using them as a pot because, they have like, you could use clay for a pot. Why would you use brass, for a pot when it's so beautiful? You can like cut it out and, wear it, as a medallion or a necklace. And so, um, you know, it's important to kind of keep those entanglements in mind.
Yeah, and I agree with what you said about couture. I think this whole Western idea of couture is kind of straying away from mass productions of clothes, and it's about the individual experience. And you talked about this as how for Native people there was intention, and it was a lot of times that designs were for originals, whether that was for mothers or babies with like a baby got a unique design. And again, I'm just going to plug the Hood Museum. If you go online, you can check out their online collection, and they have really beautiful past beadwork. And so I have a comment here from Sue who says, can we see some Jami Powell ribbon work?
Oh, nobody wants to see my ribbon work. My ribbon work is still in the learning phase, and I'm making it for my kids, not for anyone else. If you want to see some excellent ribbon work, you can look up my grandmother's ribbon work. But also my mom and my aunt are incredible ribbon workers. So my mom, Lisa Powell, has been making the awards for the National Endowment for the Arts. Uh, their folk life, what do they call them? National Endowment for the Arts, National Heritage Fellows. So she's been making those awards, and she and my Aunt Jan have ribbon work that was on view at the Denver Art Museum. But there are also like so many women creating incredible ribbon work. But the best place to see ribbon work is in our community when we dance on Sundays. That's when everyone kind of, during our dances, Sundays is when everyone gets out their best ribbon work and wears it. And it's for us. It's not for anyone else.
Beautiful. And Ian says, oh, yes, we do, in reference to your ribbon work. So if anyone ends up seeing some Jami Powell originals, we would love that. And Amy from SAR says, I like the idea of thinking about the perspective of the end user, which I totally agree. I think, and Jami, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, and your grandmother had like made you specific or made your mom specific pieces, and I think that's a really beautiful story.
Yeah, and earlier you were talking about like sacred colors and this expectation, and anytime I talk about ribbon work, people always are like, and what do the colors mean? What do the patterns mean? And there are some family patterns, there are some designs that are representative of certain things. But, in terms of colors, like a lot of that knowledge has been lost. Um, and so, a lot of why people choose colors today is based on what they like or based on their alma mater. Um, and so, like I've got I know some people who are big Broncos fans, and so they have like orange and blue in their ribbon work. And so there's those kinds of things happening, or, sometimes it's like what you can get in the good ribbon, and finding colors that go really well together. One of the things that's really amazing about ribbon work, is that like sometimes you'll look at these colors and you're like, there's no way these colors would ever look nice together. And then, by the time like create the design and fold them and put them together, it's a beautiful composition. And so like the eye for color that a lot of these women have, is so incredible. When we first started talking, you brought up the jean jacket. And when I was a kid, I was an ass, like many of us, like my children are now. But my mom took ribbon work, that my great grandmother had made and put it onto a jean jacket, because at the time, and I feel like it's coming back, like so many other things that were popular in the early 90s, were like jean jackets that had like patches and lace and other things. And so my mom, um, took my grandmother's ribbon work and put it on this jean jacket for me. And I wore it, and all of my friends, ew, what is that? Because we lived north of Chicago in like a wealthy neighborhood. Um, and my friends were like, ew, what is that? And so I came home and was like, I'm never wearing this jacket again. I hate it. And I found that jacket a couple years ago in my mom's cedar closet, which, by the way, smells amazing. But like, like that combination of like cedar and mothballs and like Aquanet smell, is like the ultimate nostalgia for me. But I saw that and I just like, I had to apologize to my mom, and I was like, I'm sorry I was such a jerk when I was a kid, because that was like the most amazing gift, that she gave to me. And because of the actions of some of my peers, I didn't appreciate it. And now I just wish that, I could have that in an adult size, because I literally wear it every day.
It's such an iconic, take on the jean jacket, which is definitely coming back in style. We have a comment from Lisa that says thanks, and Sue says nice. And Jamie, I can definitely relate. There's my grandma used to make me Navajo skirts, and I remember just throwing a fit before church one day because I was so embarrassed to wear this Navajo skirt because none of the other girls at church were Navajo or had Navajo outfits, and I was like crying and being a little baby. But now I'm like, oh my God, that is so precious, and I still have that skirt, and I don't want kids, but if I ever, it happens, I just am so excited for a little one to wear that. Um, and so I encourage anyone who's watching to add comments or questions for Jami. We're kind of nearing our time towards the end here, and this has been a really great conversation. So please, if you have comments or questions, go ahead and add them. But for now, Jami, I want you to tell our viewers from your official and professional opinion, what are some of your favorite Native American fashion designers that our viewers can check out and also purchase pieces from?
That's so much pressure. Well, we've already talked about Jamie Okuma. Also like Christian Allaire, and his book has amazing, designers in it as well. Um, I just saw an image of Bethany Yellowtail's, mask that I also have, that Nancy Pelosi was rocking, the blue with the elk teeth. Um, but there's also just like, so, there are these big names, Shosho Esquiro, um, Margaret Jacobs is now doing fashion as well. She has these incredible like steel bolo ties. They're like powder coated steel. And they're amazing. She has ones with like tobacco flowers and ones with strawberries. Uh, but you know, like there are so many people in communities, and like, that you can find through Instagram or online, who are doing incredible work. And so, just finding these folks and, supporting Indigenous artists and makers. One of the things that I've been talking about with my colleagues a lot recently is thinking about our budget as a moral document. And so right now I'm really trying to buy art only from living artists and not artists represented by galleries. So the money is going directly into artists and like to Indigenous communities. But also, I try and be mindful. I try to be mindful of that in my own spending and where I spend my money for gifts for family or other folks. And actually, we recently, I'm working on a grant right now, and we were supposed to have these workshops as part of the grant that were like training workshops, and we had a budget for catering. And so we're still doing the workshops virtually, but we're taking the catering budget for that and we're actually using it to buy food from Indigenous vendors. And so the money is still going directly into communities, and it's still like we're able to spend the money because we budgeted to have money for food and we're buying food. It's just instead of getting it from the local caterer, we're getting it from Indigenous owned businesses all across the country.
That's fantastic. Thank you. So, on that note, viewers, Jami told you to go spend your money, and especially on Indigenous artistry. So, I think we're coming to a conclusion here. On that note, like Jami was talking about buying from Indigenous women, this month of April on the SAR Instagram, we had some really fabulous women. They were all females, including Margaret Roach Jacobs, who is a weaver, Just Beaded Things, Darby and Basil. Darby and Basil from Just Beaded Things, who are also Dartmouth alumna. And we also had Amber Bear Dawn, who is a fabulous writer. You can purchase things from these people, or you can check out their work and support them. So make sure you do it. It's really important. And Jami is the last person in our installation this month. I can't thank you enough, Jami. I'm not going to get emotional because I can, but you've inspired me and so many other students in incredible ways. And I appreciate your professional and personal work in all types of art in fashion. It means a lot to me. And also a big thank you to everyone at SAR IRC for making this happen, especially to Felicia Garcia, who has been really iconic and amazing helping us with this project. So stay safe, and everyone. And wow, we're getting really fabulous comments. I appreciate everyone for being here. And Jami, I'm going to give you the chance to say any last words.
No, I love that Dr. Miranda Bellardi Lewis says, thanks for the permission to buy more Native art, Dr. Powell. Yes, do it. And I'm going to do it too. It's almost Mother's Day. That's like my favorite. 2 years ago, I got actually an Anna Beck necklace for myself at the Dartmouth Powwow. So just thank you so much for your work. Thank you to your team at SAR. Felicia, I know Felicia Garcia was here. And just, I'm so proud of you and the incredible work that you're doing. And I can't wait to continue to see you grow in your role as a museum professional and to be there to support and cheer you along all the way.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to say goodbye to all of our viewers. But remember, the lasting lesson here is that Dr. Powell said it's okay to blow your money on Indigenous art. And on that note, I'm going to say goodbye. Make sure you check out our future SAR series on our Instagram. You can also watch this recorded series on our IGTV, and we'll also be on YouTube if you want to share. So with that, thank you so much, Dr. Powell. Thank you to our viewers, and big props to SAR IRC for making this happen. So bye, everyone.
Bye.